Our scripture reading tonight is taken from Romans 8:18 to 27. I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory about to be revealed to us. For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not of its own will, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its enslavement to decay and will obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. We know that the whole creation has been groaning together as it suffers together the pains of labor. And not only the creation, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly while we wait for adoption, the redemption of our bodies. For in hope we were saved. Now hope that is seen is not hope, for who hopes for what one already sees? But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience. Likewise, the Spirit helps us in our weakness, for we do not know how to pray as we ought. But that very Spirit intercedes with groanings too deep for words. And God, who searches hearts, knows what is the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for the saints according to the will of God. The word of the Lord.
Hello. My name is Jo. I think most of you know me. I am a chiropractor by profession, and I'm married to the guy in yellow at the back, and we have 2 teenagers at home. I get to lead music sometimes, and occasionally I get to come up here and talk about God with you. And I often seem to talk about kind of bummer topics. The title for today is The Vocation of Lament. And I guess in 2020, I talked about the discomfort of waiting during Advent. And I was talking about discomfort, and I was talking about liminality. That's something I bring up a lot. And then a couple years ago, I spent at least 15 minutes talking about pain, and you all had to listen, and talked about liminality a lot then as well. And you might start to think, and you would be right, that I see those themes of liminality and the lessons of pain pretty much everywhere I go. And maybe that's an occupational hazard because I deal with pain a lot every day at work. And maybe it's a coping mechanism for feeling just hopeless and despairing since November 8th, 2016. And maybe that's just the lens that I came out of evangelicalism with, and I'm just never going to put it down. But today, we're going to talk about Romans 8 with those themes in mind. This is totally irrelevant, but I grew up thinking that it was sinful to have favorite parts of the Bible because the whole Bible is equally important. All scripture is God-breathed and useful for teaching, rebuking, correction, and training in righteousness. And so like John 3:16 is just as important as like Psalm 5:8, just as important as Genesis 2 something. So you always had to be a little sheepish when you were like, oh, this is kind of like maybe one of my favorites right now, just right now. But I will tell you a secret. Romans 8:1, so the beginning of this chapter that we've been studying, and Romans 8:39, the end. Those are 2 of probably my top 5 favorites. I still have favorites, even though I thought it was wrong. And look at this book. This is the book that we've been using as our guide, Into the Heart of Romans. Look at that, a deep dive into Paul's greatest letter. Is he allowed to say that? Is he allowed to say that one of Paul's letters is the best? Well, and love covers a multitude of sins. That's also from the Bible. Also a favorite. So I was occupied with 2 chapters of this book covering the verses that Jade read for us. And the first half, you might have noticed, are very caught up in this idea of glorification, glory. So he talks about we suffer with the Messiah so that we may also be glorified with him. The sufferings we go through now are nothing compared to the glory that is coming. Creation will be freed when God's children are glorified. So what does glory mean? I think a very straightforward interpretation would maybe put that into the overarching assurance of the whole chapter, right? So we go from no condemnation in verse 1, nothing can separate us from God's love in verse 39. And so that faith that justifies us means we're going to heaven. Heaven is glory. However, N.T. Wright is adamant that it's very important that we understand that Romans 8 has nothing to do with heaven, not even a little bit. In fact, he points out the topic of where Christians go after death is missing from Paul's letters entirely. Instead, Wright wants us to know this definition. The primary meanings of glory in this passage are, simultaneously, the glorious presence of God himself dwelling within us by the Spirit, and the wise, healing, reconciling rule of God's people over the whole creation. These two, God's presence and human rule, are made for each other. So the process of glorification involves God's ruling presence inside of us and our ruling presence in creation. Why does creation need our ruling presence? Because that was the whole plan. God initiated this project of creation. We were to be his image-bearing stewards. And Wright says that God's creation was designed to flourish under the authority of genuine God-reflecting humans. Except Eden happened. So in verse 20, Paul is talking about creation was subjected to pointless futility because of the one who placed it in this subjection. That's God, placing creation in subjection. We disrupted things. Now creation is wandering in futility because God is sticking to the plan in hope that creation will be freed through this process of glorification. On its face, this sounds like a little bit of academic quibbling, and he does it for a whole chapter. Why do we need to assign a deeper interpretation of glory when maybe calling it heaven would be just as good? Well, because of what comes after. Verses 22 through 27 expand on this future glorification by bringing it into the present. Our present suffering is still part of God's purpose. So even in our present suffering, glory is already at work. How? Because of the Spirit. So the Spirit is simultaneously divine presence and enables our action within the world. So the Spirit is joining that glorification together for us. Presence and human purpose or human authority. And that leads to glory. Wright summarizes it in this way. The Creator is not going to erase the working principle of his original creation, the principle according to which his world would work properly through obedient humans. That, after all, had been, as we see with long Christian hindsight, a plan designed for God's own use, for his own second self to come as the ultimate wise and obedient human, and for his own Spirit to reanimate other humans and equip them for their own consequent roles. I love how this quote sort of underlines the workings of the Trinity, that there was this plan from the Father, and then the Spirit reanimates us in parallel with the work of Christ. God's plan for our salvation is not just about heaven. If glory means that heaven is just like really, really better than here, then these next verses about the Spirit groaning for us and interceding for us, they become a little bit disconnected, comforting, but they don't really make any sense in light of sort of an escapist interpretation of glory. But if glory means God's intention for our God-reflecting right action in the world, then we have this complete picture of both our future and our present purpose as Christ followers. God does not intend to rescue us out of creation to somewhere else. He intends to be with us and work through us, to engage now in taking on the pain and the sorrow of the world. So when we stand in the world's pain, we step onto a liminal threshold that moves us towards glory. This is an important reframe toward our responsibility to the present world, as ugly and messy as it is. We cannot gloss over the reality of the world's pain with platitudes. This is okay because Jesus is the answer. Nor can we condemn a messy world smug with our own salvation. Well, of course, the world is like this. They don't know Jesus, but we do, and we're on our way somewhere better. Nor can we blame the sin in others while claiming grace in ourselves. God is punishing those sinful people. And isn't it a shame that we're still caught up in this world and we'll just have to pray for patience? We do not get to spiritually bypass the mess of the world and our duty to that world under God's plan. God's rescuing wisdom for the world is not about escape. Grace is not passive, and our purpose is not inertia. We are, in fact, called to action. That's what vocation means. It means a call to meaningfully act. We're called to share in the work of Jesus through the Spirit. Jesus was present in the world. He showed us perfect incarnated authority within the world. He died for the sin and the pain of that world, and all of that was a process of glorification, even before his resurrection. Yet, because of the resurrection, now the Spirit of Jesus is the Spirit in us, present here and now. And we prolong the incarnation of Christ by standing in the pain of the world, where the Spirit grieves with groanings too deep for words. And this, too, is glory. The primary expression of being God's image-bearing people in the world is lament, and that is our vocation. Wright summarizes it in the later chapter. When Paul speaks here of those who love God, he is referring to those who, precisely at the point where they are at the end of their mental, emotional, and spiritual tether, find within themselves the deep sorrow of all the world, as it were concentrated into one place, and find at that moment that they are part of the dialogue of love between the Father and the Spirit. And then later on, he says, the picture that opens is a matchless image of the Trinity, the Spirit calling to the Father from the depth of the world's pain, and God the Father hearing and knowing what is going on, and we who find ourselves caught up in this extraordinary communication, the dialogue of love between the Father and the Spirit, we, as Paul says in verse 29, are conformed to the image of the Son. Again, I do feel like this is all pretty academic. Romans 8 feels impenetrably dense, which is, a lot of Paul feels like that. And N.T. Wright he's an accessible academic, but he's still an academic. And I had a hard time latching into why he was so adamant that we understand what this process of glorification means. But I do feel, I did come to a place where I saw the beauty between those parallel processes of glorification, that there's this future glorification, and we can hold to that promise, but it also signals our responsibility here to participate in glorification now, and we do that by engaging with the world's pain through lament. So I'm thinking about all these themes, and I thought about a time in my life when I intentionally sat with struggle. I struggled a lot as a new mom. I was consumed with anxiety. That's a really nice way to put it. I was consumed with anxiety that I was so messed up by my childhood that I would inevitably mess up theirs, let alone give them a good one. So around November 2013, I made a hashtag on Instagram. The hashtag was Mom Mornings Are Beautiful. And I would tag it onto pictures from our mornings. So this one, that's the first one. It was a lot of pictures of breakfast like this. A lot of pictures of avocado toast. We can go to the next one. That says, they're sick, so theoretically this could be worse. It was a lot of pictures of, really beautiful sunlight glowing over scattered toys. I took these pictures in the morning when my patience and resources were theoretically at their peak, which actually wasn't saying much. I started about here and it was all downhill after that. We can go to the next one. This one's from a little later on. This is in 2015. It says, I may never change these curtains despite being pink. I don't like pink. When this was my youngest's nursery, the morning light would come in all rosy filtered like this as she nursed, rocking gently on the glider. My parenting so rarely looks like the rosy Hallmark moments, but those mornings I felt like a real mom. This practice was supposed to be a practice of mindfulness. It was supposed to ground me in the present moment and then find the fullness of it, the full humanity, the full complexity, the full pain of it, but also maybe the beauty at the edges. A photo can be a wordless prayer, capturing an image of hope that maybe I could carry that beauty into the rest of the day. And I'll be honest, I was simultaneously, doing a little bypassing of my own, hoping for a little dopamine hit when people would click like on my pretty pictures. But I was also trying to create some community and offer an invitation to the other moms in my life to likewise catch the beauty on the edges of their own hard journeys. I don't want to give the impression that my primary experience of early motherhood was lament, but it was very hard and complicated. I know now that those days were the easy ones, in a way, and I know now that I am not so powerful to ruin lives. But I do regret, in many ways, all the ways that I held myself back from enjoying my children because I was so afraid of myself. And regret is a form of lament. And there's a fuller story that I realized only as I was looking back. Mere weeks after I started this practice, Christopher's youngest brother, Derek, would suddenly die of heart failure. And these first years where these pictures came from, they were autopilot, right? It was about surviving. I was so numb when I don't really remember a lot of the pictures that I found as I was looking through them. I whatever mindfulness I was exerting in this practice literally lasted, I was mindful for like that moment. And that's what lament can be. It can be moment by moment that we stand in the pain of the world for this breath and then that breath. I look at these pictures, there's grief and dissociation and desperation running through every post. But in every post, there's also champagne-colored morning light washing over my little home and my little family. And the light doesn't replace or diminish or fix the pain. It's just that all of it existed at once. It's grief and it's beautiful. It's mundane and it's love. It's exhausting and it's sacred. Here's the thing. One day we will be together in glory. And imagine that we will be able to look back and see the times when we followed the call to lament, when we stood in the pain of the world. And imagine how we'll see just so much light washing over it all. And it won't be beautiful because we managed to get through the ugly by pretending it couldn't touch us until we landed in heaven. It won't be beautiful because we bypassed and condemned our way into grace. It will be painful and beautiful to see all of it existing at once, to see the full picture of God's wise plan and our part in it. It is painful and beautiful, even now, to stand on the threshold with the Spirit and know that God's intention is glory in the present and the future. This doesn't erase or diminish or fix the pain today, but we can hold hope with the open hands of faith and trust in the whole picture. Romans 8 is very dense, but it is also wonderful. It's a whole package of security, bookended between no condemnation and nothing can separate us from God's love. And this passage is this glorious middle part of the salvation sandwich with our commission. Because we are held in such steady assurance, we carry out gospel right now into the world's reality of strife and challenge. So maybe now I can say that pain and suffering isn't just my quirky theological obsession. Maybe it is God's quirky redemptive plan to inhabit the reality of the world and offer relief and grace and love. Or, as I said in my last teaching, pain has a unique liminality. Pain is so real and consuming, it makes anything less real disappear. And in that place, we can encounter God with a devastating clarity. Or, as I said in the teaching before that, may this be true for you while things remain unsettled and uncomfortable. This was in 2020. While things remain unsettled and uncomfortable, take permission to sit in that thin place, and God will meet you there, and you will not be alone. Or, as N.T. Wright says it, all of this is part of what Paul understands by loving God, being enfolded and taken up within the Jesus-shaped love, that constantly flows in both directions between the Father and the Spirit. Or, as poet David Gates says it, there's this impulse to imagine that spirituality is supposed to feel like elevation. If that's what spirituality is, an escape hatch, I want no part of it. I reject a spirituality that floats. I want one that plants, that digs, that composts, that takes the world seriously enough to stay in it and maybe even try to help. Thank you.